Thank you so very much, Mr. President. When I heard we were going to consider this bill today, I thought about our conversations on the Senate floor yesterday about confinement and about incarceration, and I'm very excited that today's bill is about prevention and it's about solutions. I've been thinking about Toby, who's sitting at home with his big sister being his child care provider and his teacher because his mom, who's a full-time essential worker, doesn't make enough money to pay for full-time child care. And Jessica, a parent in my district who had to turn down a job promotion she was offered because it just didn't pencil out and more than doubled her subsidy payment for her kids. And then there's Amy and her husband who have a new infant who's medically fragile, and they're unable to find care for their infant because child care providers are not allowed, nor do they have the dollars for supports for one-on-one care that many of our fragile children need. The Fair Start for Kids Act will help them and hundreds and thousands of other children and families across the state. Did you know, Mr. President, that there are over 500,000 children in the state of Washington that don't have access to licensed child care? Because access is limited everywhere you go. And that full-time care for an infant is 113% more than the cost of in-state public college tuition because child care is incredibly expensive. It hurts families and it hinders our recovery. Working families forego $14 billion a year because of lack of access to child care, and our businesses across the state of Washington lose more than $2.8 billion a year. The status quo has got to change. This is not a new issue, and as we've heard, the pandemic has only made this matter worse and made this matter more urgent. So the Fair Start for Kids Act is a four-pronged approach to address both the child care and the early learning systems for the state of Washington. The first thing it will do is stabilize and expand the child care industry by increasing subsidy rates and by increasing resources and supports to the providers who need this so much across our state. It will make child care more affordable by reducing copays for families and also increasing eligibility to subsidies for far more families across the state of Washington. It'll also make child care and early learning programs more accessible. It will push out our ECAP, state-funded pre-K program entitlement, increasing eligibility at the same time, and will also expand services to families, friends, and neighbor care across the state. It will also strengthen prevention and intervention services, all critical when we're thinking about young children. Things like mental health consultation, things like home visiting, things like dual language supports, play groups, early intervention services. These are all critical pieces of the Fair Start for Kids Act. My entire career has been spent working to create a quality system of care for all families across the state of Washington. And since coming to the Senate, I've continued that work. Mr. President, I've even come to visit you when you were in the other Washington to talk about this very thing and how important it is, not only for our state, but for families across the United States. The Fair Start for Kids Act is the culmination of hundreds of hours of work with stakeholders from all over the state, and I am so thankful for their input and for their support. We have to support families, and we've got to meet the needs of children now. Mr. President, may I read a short passage from the CEO of the Institute for Women's Policy Research, please?
Please proceed.
To be sure, the pandemic has exposed the fragility and brokenness of the U.S. care system. High-powered corporate moms and those on the front lines working to ensure we have groceries and other essentials have all struggled with care. It's an issue that cuts across race, socioeconomic status, and occupation, impacting some families harder than others. This is a unifying moment that we cannot turn away from. And I will also say this is one of the best return on investments that we can make. Passing the Fair Start for Kids Act will be a game changer for not only families, but our child care providers all across the state. It reflects the hard work of so many, and I'm going to call out former Representative Ruth Kagi, who worked on this for so long, as well as other members from both chambers. And I am so humbled and so proud today to stand here before you and ask you, Mr. President, as well as the body, to support the Fair Start for Kids Act, engross second substitute Senate Bill 5237. Thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I just want to thank Senator Wilson for working tremendously hard on this bill. And it warms my heart to know that we, as a state, are already paying for this and just doing the necessary work to expand access. What I also love about expanding access to childcare is this issue, while it does disproportionately impact specific communities, it simply does not discriminate. And I can tell you, as a mother who needed childcare as a full-time college student and young military wife, and as a mother who needed childcare as an educator in our public schools, and as a mother who needed childcare as the CEO of the Tacoma Urban League, and as a mother who continues to need childcare and assistance as a legislator, as a senator in this state, this issue does not discriminate. It impacts all of our families who have children. And I want to make sure that we are thinking about folks who that $100 copay is a struggle for. It was me. it has been me before, where I had to choose between, you know, when we were in the middle of deployments and the military would help us during deployments with childcare, it still was a juggle between paying for childcare and paying for other necessary bills. I went to school full time while my spouse was deployed at that time. And when we weren't on deployments, I still struggled with this enormous childcare payment of, you know, between $800 and $1,200 for my children. But what I know is this is not just daycare. The expense is worth it because I got quality early childhood education for my kids. They also got extended learning opportunities while they were at childcare. They learned empathy and compassion. That's where they started dance classes or soccer, other programs that were offered through their childcare facilities, or other enriching activities while I worked a full day from student to executive. And so I want to make sure that more families in our state have this opportunity, that more, you know, working parents have access to childcare and don't have to make the tough decision to leave their kids at home or send their kid to childcare. And I remember I was a single mom for a brief period and then got remarried. And while I was trying to save some money for this marriage, I took my youngest out of daycare for a little bit and went to put him back in, but he had lost his spot. And so for the first time, now my youngest was a latchkey kid and just trying to figure that piece out. But it broke my heart to know that, to try to save a little bit of money in the summer where we weren't using childcare as much. We now were in a situation where during the school year, we had to juggle and be more creative. And so I want expanded access. I don't want people to lose those spots in the summer when they want to, you know, bring their child out. I want enough childcare opportunity for everyone in our state. And this pandemic has brought up so many disparities. It's brought so many of those disparities to light, disparities we already knew existed. And childcare has been thrown into this major crisis. So parents around our state who have stories like mine simply need full-time care for infants. They're already paying 113% more than you would pay for in-state public college tuition. It's expensive. I want to be a part of legislation that's going to help families, that's going to help parenting mothers like myself, whether they're a senator or a full-time college student, do what's right for our children, start them off with a strong foundation and surround them with qualified, well-paid childcare providers, whether it's in-home or at a job facility or at a childcare center. This is important legislation. There's lack of access to childcare, and it's hurting our families here in Washington State, especially women. And my heart goes out to women who, even during this pandemic, have had to leave their jobs because they didn't have adequate childcare. So this bill is going to give those parents, those mothers, a fair start, as the bill's name promises. And I do urge a yes vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rising in support of Senate Bill 5237, very heartfelt thanks to the prime sponsor, Senator C. Wilson, and the chair of the committee, Senator Wellman, for their good work. You know, Mr. President, when I think about childcare, I think about walking into the childcare center or an in-home provider's home, and I think about the sounds that you hear. You hear giggling. You hear singing about old MacDonald's farm and this land being your land and my land. You hear stories about hungry caterpillars and green eggs and ham. You hear questions about fairy princesses and dinosaurs and astronauts, and questions about whether fairy princesses and dinosaurs can become astronauts. And those are the sounds, Mr. President, of children learning. And that learning will propel them. We know from data it will propel them to success in K-12 and in higher education. We know that those sounds of hungry caterpillars and giggling are also the sound of jobs. The jobs that those children's parents can actually go to because they have a safe place for their kids to go, and they can be more productive. We know this from data. They're actually more productive employees because their kids have a safe, reliable place to go. We know that because employers tell that to us as well, and that's why so many employers and business groups support this bill. And those sounds, Mr. President, about astronauts and fairy princesses are also the sound of taxpayers getting a return on their investment. Because all of that educational success, that means those kids actually become productive members of our society, productive taxpayers. It means that they're less likely to be in prison and that they're going to have better health outcomes. Those sounds, Mr. President, are the sounds of success for our state, for the state of Washington. Now, 4 years ago, we passed a bill called the Early Start Act, and that bill was all about quality. It was about infusing quality in our early learning system. That was really important to get the quality right, because all of those benefits that I talked about, you only get that if it's high quality. But we needed something else. We didn't get access. We didn't get broad access. The eloquent words of Senator Nobles talking about her experience. We've heard from so many others, people who are so excited when they qualify for Working Connections benefits for childcare, and then they call the 49 places on the list, and none of them have spots for their child. We hear the stories about the person who declines a raise because it puts them slightly above the ability to receive this benefit. This bill invests historically in raising the rates so we'll have better access, in eliminating the copay cliff, and raising the eligibility so that we can cover more kids and families and help more employers. This bill is the most significant bill that we will consider this session for kids and families and employers, and I urge your support. Thank you.